everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of what I am calling Walking with Wizards. It may be a bit of a tongue twister, but here we are. And today is, I don't know, it just feels like a special day because of Seated With is just somebody who, the moment where virtually we got to sit together, we haven't even gotten to be together in person. I was just kind of like, man, this Mike feels like soul family. And so Mike Thacker is here with me. I met him through one of my mentors and good friends, Albina Rippey. You guys, if you've done any of my trainings, you hear me just tooting the Albina Rippey horn all the time because she is so wonderful. And everybody she has connected me to has also been so wonderful. And so Mike is a wealth of knowledge in just holistic healing, kind of, I don't know, what you just shared before we got on here. I'm like, Mike's a little bit of a like radical healing kind of guy with the fasting and like mental work and mindset work and breath work. And so today he and I are just going to dive in. We're going to jam out. So thank you for being here, Mike.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation, Danielle.
Yeah, I was sharing before we got on, one of my big soapboxes, I would say, is, the tools of breath. And today we're going to talk a lot about breath. We may chat on something else at the end, but I think for a lot of people, like knowing that while it's nice to do it in a group environment at a class or a retreat or all of these things, like it's just as important and just as profound to do them in your home environment. So
Mhm.
that was kind of like my first question I wanted to ask, what is your current home practice look like? Like, what is your weekly kind of wellness and looping in breath? Like, how does Mike Thacker currently honor his body and self?
Well, since 2019, my regimen has been breath work first thing in the morning and then flow into meditation. And then my movement practice starts after that. And maybe 2 to 3 times a week, I'll mix it up and I'll do the movement before the breath and the meditation. And then on those days, I do the movement first, the breath, and the meditation. What I kept finding though was if I did the movement first and I only had 90 minutes, I would do an hour with the movement, and then that would only squeeze me down to having 30 minutes where I'd have to squeeze in the meditation and the breath work, which seemed a little,
Mhm.
I don't know, a little less than what I needed. And so I started doing it the opposite. So I always get the breath and meditation in, and if I got to squeeze something, I'll squeeze the movement. And so far it hasn't hurt.
Yeah.
And I feel a lot of benefit from that.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. I will joke with people like, so, speaking to home practice, like I'll go into places. I just did some breath work at a, university group last week and a library group, and people who aren't necessarily seeking breath or the profound experience that can come when you like consciously start taking deep breaths for maybe the first time in your life. But I keep trying to share like this is so simple. You can like please do it at home. Like please do it at home. And you may be interested in hearing this too. And I talk about it a lot like with my child, with my baby, you when you were visiting, I think I'm when you did the module for the training, I think I maybe was pregnant or it was like right before. So it's like over 2 years ago. But all throughout my pregnancy, breath work, and breath work that, because I had an established practice. And now, he's 2 and he knows we start our day with breath work, right? And now my practices aren't like the very spiritual, like with all my different drinks and concoctions and journal, like it can be a hot mess. But that little being, he knows, like he already knows the power of taking a deep breath. And it's through that home practice. And sometimes even with you from the recording, from that module, we have a joke, and Kathy Heineck, if you're ever watching this, Mike, when you're guiding it right before you start, you're saying like, if anything, physical sensations happen, it's okay. You're kind of teeing it up, and then you go, love that smile, Kathy. And that's like our like running joke when we do breath work with you. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Awesome. And back to the whole, something when you were saying the home practice, the most important part of the home practice, though it's amazing to do the deep breaths and the breath holds and everything, is slowing your breath down and just doing that four-part ujjayi breathing as part of your everyday life. So
Hmm.
many people that have high blood pressure, diabetes, weight issues, digestive issues, sleep problems, etc. If they don't completely disappear, they will significantly improve if you go from the shallow, rapid chest breathing to just
Hmm.
long, slow abdominal breaths. And ideally, you'd breathe in for four, hold for four, out for four, hold for four. So your whole breath cycle would take 16 seconds,
Hmm.
except for your more experienced yogis, Danielle, in which case I would expect them to inhale for about four, hold for eight,
Hmm.
exhale for eight, and then hold for eight or maybe 12. And so they wouldn't even get in two breaths a minute if they're moving with that cycle.
Yeah, see, this is why we're doing this conversation. So I was like, Mike's gonna have a nugget. I know he is because I've been. So do you do that practice more often than like a Wim Hof style?
So the day every time I'm aware of
Hmm.
my breath, which because I've been practicing this for a long time becomes quite a bit, I realize, okay, how fast or how slow am I breathing? How deeply am I breathing? And obviously, if I'm working out, it's fine. Breathe deeply as you can and breathe rapidly. But if you're just sitting like we are right now, it's a matter of how often are we breathing? How
Hmm.
fast are we breathing? Can we slow our breathing down?
Hmm. Yeah. So it's like a moment to moment, like the
Right.
ability to apply this, which is huge. Well, that leads in kind of to my next question that I wanted to talk about. Because a big thing that I know you've studied and you've worked with a lot are the breath holds. So
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to speak to, for some reason, I've been doing breath work for 7 years now, and the breath holds continue to be the hardest and most like triggering thing for me for some reason. Like, and so I just like forget them, and I'm just like, I just won't do them, but I know there's something for me in them. So can you speak to anything like nuggets of wisdom for me or anybody that wants to practice breath holds more?
So, for my experience of a lot of my friends, some of whom are my students and some of whom are my peers who I've talked to about this, not scientifically proven, so no double blind studies, but the theories we all have are the resistance to breath work comes from some type of unresolved trauma, and specifically the breath work around the breath hold.
Mhm.
And so, as I've worked through things, as other people have worked through things, the resistance seems to decline with the breath holds. And it's not always like, oh, I got to do my personal best. I got to do 5.5 minutes this morning, or it's not a good practice. It's like, don't get crazy. You don't have to. And that may be something else, as there may be some people that are putting that target out there that, hey, I did 4 minutes yesterday. If I don't do at least 4 minutes today, this isn't a good practice. And different days, different things. And there may be some days where it's easy to go and set a personal record. And there may be other days you may not be able to do that. And there's a lot of factors, and there's no reason to beat yourself up for it.
Hmm.
So, looping all those words I just said into three
Hmm.
basic ideas, resistance to breath hold a lot of times is a symptom of unresolved trauma.
Hmm.
Just because you're doing it doesn't mean you have to set a personal best or even equal a record you had before.
Hmm.
Just do it and
Just do it. Like,
consistent. Yeah, the third
yeah.
point is the consistency. So don't
Mhm.
worry about setting the personal record. Be consistent every day, and the resistance to the holds, like you said, probably need the holds, and maybe you need to take a long session of 45, 60, 75, maybe 90 minutes, and you just do deep breathings with breath holds and see what comes up during that
Mhm.
experience.
Yeah, I already know. Like, y'all, this is the power of us sitting together and just asking questions, and like being maybe even a little vulnerable. Like, I think so much can open up even in the asking. Because right when you started talking and said the trauma, it's like, oh yeah, it's because I had a almost drowning incident when I was very little. And I was like, oh, that's it. Like my body's like, you can't go without oxygen because of that one time. And so like how powerful is it that, we're in a time where we can just mirror and offer so much to each other. So yeah, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Isn't that wild? Wow. And have you found like the further you go on your path of just showing up for yourself, that kind of finding those edges and finding those crunchy parts maybe from your experience ends up being kind of fun to look at and examine? Has it gotten more fun for you?
I don't know if it's always fun, but definitely there's insights that come frequently. So, yes, and some of those insights are fun, and some of those insights are not as fun.
Yeah. Yes, that duality, right? Like
Yes,
being able to hold paradox right now for any being who's committed to, expanding their awareness, like the light just shining right on your face right now.
right.
It's just like yeah, it's fascinating the duality. And again, before we got on this call, we were speaking to my brick and mortar and breath, like that all kind of, I went through like a 2 year period of just deep loss, and I'm out of that period, but I'm training my body to realize I'm out of that period, where, the boogeyman's not going to jump out and get me because it kept getting me. What has your work been recently, or are there any notices that you've had with breath and grief in like classes that you've taught, in your own life, realizations with grief?
So I'll stick with my own rather than try to go into other people's stuff. So mine is more around patience and forgiveness
Hmm.
because there's a lot of things that have triggered me over the last 4 years. And I think that people who haven't done a lot of deep introspection, a lot of self worth, that's a Freudian slip there.
Hmm.
A lot of deep introspection and self inquiry, I give them a pass.
Hmm.
And the people who have and who get caught up in the narrative and pull other people into the narrative of you're good if you do this, you're bad if you do this, and
Hmm.
that that triggers me a lot. And I'm
Hmm.
sure if you go back through my Facebook feed, you can see a time in early August that just totally blew up with something I posted. And occasionally, again, my patience and forgiveness reaches a limit, and I feel that things need to be said. And
Hmm.
in retrospect, I realize I don't think it was helpful. I think the people that I kind of knew were my allies are still my allies, and the people that I knew would have issues and not have an ability to open their mind or expand beyond the paradigm they're stuck in are going
Hmm.
to continue to be stuck. And
Hmm.
so that's my learning, and that's my revelation from most of these breath sessions that I have are insights into places where I wasn't as patient, where I wasn't as kind, where I wasn't as forgiving as I
Hmm.
could have been, and insights into opportunities where I can be more of that in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to speak to like the practices and these tools and these sessions that we go into and this work and introspection. Ideally, it makes us more human, like just naturally by our innate design and I'm sure a lot of the other work that you do, the fasting and, I think we're just like starting to scratch the surface of potential, human potential without adding anything extra other than discipline and devotion to understanding who we actually are and what's actually possible outside of what the narrative is telling us who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of what you embody as like as that, just like there's so much more possible. So yeah, since there is time, I mean, I feel like we have a couple minutes. Okay, I want to talk about fasting, but I have to talk about one more thing because
Go.
it's nose and mouth breathing. And I think this will be helpful for a lot of people that are going to listen to this, a lot of the women in our web. I have been changing my modality to more nostril breathing because before it was all and I'm like panting, and like it's all mouth breathing. And recently I've been like, I don't even want to do that anymore. Like I only want to like only do nostril breathing. Do you have any shares on that science, technology, what's behind that?
Yeah, so many things, and I know that you don't have a lot of time. And certainly, if we were in a comfortable environment, just chilling out with a bottle of wine, I could talk
Yeah,
your ear off for hours on nose versus mouth breathing.
I
But
bet.
just the synopsis is, and this is stolen from one of my teachers, and I'm sure he got it from somewhere else, is the nose is meant for breathing and the mouth is meant for eating. And there are some medical reasons where for brief periods of time, you may want to do some level of mouth breathing, but nitric oxide, which is good from everything from an antiviral to an antibacterial. It lowers your blood pressure by dilating your blood vessels, and there's probably a million other metabolic functions that it regulates. They're just not on the tip of my tongue right now.
Hmm.
You only get that in high levels through not nasal breathing. You don't get it through breathing through your mouth. Your nose is not necessarily, it doesn't have rifling in
Hmm.
it, but it does have a level of concavity that will bring air more forcefully and powerfully into your lungs and if you're breathing through your mouth. And the
Interesting.
last thing is you have filters in your nose that you don't have
Hmm.
in your mouth. So I know a lot of times people cue breathe out through your mouth, but then I see people who breathe out for their mouth also have a tendency to breathe in through your mouth.
Hmm.
So unless you're an advanced practitioner of all these breath modalities, I recommend keeping your mouth shut,
Hmm.
breathing through your nose.
Yeah. I feel like it almost like reverses so much of the work that I've done, but not really because I don't know, when we're offering these experiences and opportunities to gather and practice, we're always offering from our current level of understanding and awareness.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so the idea for me is like if I keep growing and expanding in that, then so will the teachings and the practices and the experiences. So yeah, I was like, oh, we really got to talk. And now having a little one who I don't think he closed his mouth the first year of his life. And I'm like, just I'm really start thinking about it, and he does nose breathe more now. But
And I don't know if you've read any of this, and I apologize for interrupting you, but I just want to make
oh
sure I get
yeah.
this in there. Like in almost all native cultures, everywhere from this continent to Africa to Asia, that's a practice that, because obviously mothers and children are not separated, unlike this culture where the mothers go off to work and they're left with caregivers. And that's something they do is they basically close their child's mouth if the mouth opens up and they start breathing out of their mouth.
Hmm.
And that way the child starts developing the habit to breathe through their nose.
Yep. And they're so smart. Like so many women in our web are moms or going to be becoming moms or new moms and dads. But it's like or caretakers, they'll pick up, they'll understand, my little guy's too. And he knows, we start our day with breath work and now, and, breathe through your nose, baby. And he'll shut his mouth. Um, so yeah, like just that communicating can go so far also. And just, when he's sleeping, I'm just shutting it. Like you have to develop this skill because I know too much science on how, what can happen when we, only mouth breathe. Um,
Yes.
okay, well, last couple minutes, and then you gotta close your work day, and I'm gonna go start dinner. Tell me a little bit about what's exciting you about fasting, because actually, fasting is what kickstarted my personal journey also. So when you said that, I'm like, let's just give everybody a little bit of something because I started with the master cleanse. I've never done like a full fast, but and I would do it like every 6 months and I just felt incredible. 5 days. So yeah, I would love to
Mhm.
hear like what's exciting you about fasting, like anything you want to share.
Well, let me just share that I started off with a master cleanse like you did. I've been fasting since 2003, so about 21 years.
Hmm.
And I transitioned from master cleanse to juice and fruit fasts, and then I went to pure water fasts. And then January of 17, I went to one meal a day with at least one 48-hour period every week with nothing but water, and then at least one period every 6 to 8 weeks where I would go at least 72 hours with nothing but water.
Mm.
And then last Sunday, and this is after years of having friends tell me about dry fasts, and I always thought, well, maybe if you're in Terre Haute, Indiana, maybe you can dry fast there. But in Texas, it's 1,000,000 degrees most of the time, and you're basically the only thing keeping you from bursting into flames is the fact that you're downing a liter every hour. And if I stop doing that, I'm probably going to have problems. I did my first dry fast, started on the evening of the 20th of October, so last Sunday,
Mm.
and went until Wednesday, and I lived to tell about it. I did 66 hours with absolutely no liquid of any sort. And then I kept reading stuff that you should start drinking liquid about 6 hours before you start eating.
Hmm.
So I didn't make it the full 72. I only did 71 hours. So I only got 5 hours in of
Hmm.
drinking before eating, but no adverse impacts. And other than a little bit of the initial discomfort of being thirsty, I was fine. There was no
Mm.
real negative impact. Granted, it is October, so it's not like it's the middle of the summer, but it is still in the high 80s, low 90s here, and we haven't had rain in quite some time, so we are in drought state, so it's still very dry, and
Hmm.
I survived. So I am definitely a fan of the dry fasting, and I've been a fan of the water fasting and juice fasting for many years. And I would say if anybody has any health issues, if there's only three things you can do, the first is improve your breath because you're
Hmm.
breathing all the time. The second is eat less and
Hmm.
practice fasting. And
Hmm.
then the third is move your body with proper alignment because though
Hmm.
there's so many people that do movement, they have such poor body alignment when they do it. Anything that is building strength and endurance is good, but it's even better if you build strength and endurance when you're aligning your body and using your bones, your muscles, your joints
Yeah.
correctly as opposed to causing injury.
It's like sacred geometry,
Right.
working with the alignment of these bodies, which, is a whole other rabbit hole. Um,
Right.
Jerome is going to love hearing the fasting. Last thing I would ask is what about there's conversations about like the differences for women and men doing
Yeah.
fasting and like hormones and what is there any science or anything that you've studied as far as those differences?
So the first thing I'd say is in the last year, there have been so many people, women asking me about fasting, and I've been constantly reminded that I'm not in a female body and I shouldn't be giving women advice. But then I felt that was kind of a cop out to not know something. And so now I know much more about a woman's cycle and the hormones associated with every phase of the cycle than I ever thought I would know or ever wanted to know up until a year ago. There is an amazing book by Mindy Peltz called Fast Like a Girl. I would
Mm.
advise every woman who's truly interested in fasting to buy that book or at least go and watch some of her YouTube videos. She has a channel, a lot of great talks. But in essence, a guy makes testosterone every hour on the hour.
Mhm.
If they're healthy male, they're always getting a shot of it. A woman basically gets one big shot of testosterone once a month.
Mhm.
And that's the difference. A guy can just decide, I'm going to stop eating for 3 days right this very second and have
Yeah.
no adverse impact. A woman needs to be very cognizant of her cycle. And on day
Mm.
one through about day 10, she can fast with impunity.
Mhm.
Day 11 to day 13, maybe up to day 14, she needs to be a little careful. Then from ovulation until her next period, she should not do any kind of fasting unless she is very knowledgeable about her body and
Mhm.
very experienced with fasting.
Yep. That's what I figured. I mean, that makes it pretty clear. Oh, these bodies are amazing.
Yeah.
They're so amazing. Yeah, and I'm grateful for friendships and connections that, prioritize that. So thank you, just for, like I spoke to before, just staying on your own path. That's why you were just such a obvious first for this series. Walking with wizards, people who are, very committed, and I see that. And yeah, I can't. Yeah, are you gonna write a book sometime, or is that gonna happen? Is that on your list? Like,
It's not on my list now, but again, never
Yeah,
say never. I mean, I don't think it was on Roger's list whenever he wrote his book either.
yeah,
So again, never say never.
yeah, yeah. So how are you? Are you only offering classes in Texas? Are you doing any virtual work?
Right now, I'm just doing classes in Texas, and I've realized that the social aspect is what I like the most. So
Hmm.
if there is nobody, basically, I do classes in a way to make sure that I'm either partnering with people that I want to hang out with and do things with
Yeah.
afterwards, or I'm attracting the people. So there's always a social aspect to all of my classes. I stopped doing online classes, I guess, back in 2022. But having said that, if there is an interest and people start pinging me, I could get back into it if there was an audience.
Yeah, yeah, just following the flow. I love that. And you spoke to the social aspect, like going to a meal after going having a beer or whatever. Like to me, that's what spiritual work or transformational work, that's the nugget, being together and what's possible when you feel surrounded by people who are also committed to knowing themselves more. It's like relationships just deepen. And I'm sure you're feeling that in your communities. And
Absolutely, absolutely. And back to the whole blue zones. And if anybody's read the book, I mean, that was like the biggest finding. Like, yeah, there's Mediterranean diets, there's people that are on pure plant-based diets, there's people on vegetarian diets, there's people that are eating fish, etc. But the one commonality is all those people had strong community bonds, strong friendship bonds, strong relationships where, yeah, that trumps everything. So if you want to drink a little bit of alcohol, if you want to eat some meat, if you want to eat some processed and refined sugar, just make sure that you're building those relationships while you're doing those events. You're not just holed up on your couch by yourself doing those things.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much again for your time. I think we nailed it. So y'all reach out to me. I know I'll loop, I can connect you guys to Mike. I feel like you're just kind of like flying under the radar a little bit in the virtual world. And I don't even know where my virtual world is going, but I am grateful for this conversation. So thank you again.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful evening, Danielle. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
All right. Thanks, Mike. We'll see you
All
later.
right.